With America's 250th birthday right around the corner, the fight over what it means to be a patriot, well, it feels more intense than ever. But what if the fight ends, not with a clear winner, but with one side kind of accidentally convincing itself the other was right all along? We're going to dive into a fascinating theory today about how exactly that could happen.
So the story kicks off with this pretty wild premise. You've got a political group that sees patriotism as this super powerful brand, right? And they decide, hey, let's just adopt its symbols. For purely strategic reasons. It's basically like putting on a costume, just to win over an audience.
And that right there, that leads us to the big question we're tackling today. What happens when that performance stops being just an act? What if the costume, that thing you just put on, starts to feel like your own skin? And believe me, this is where the story gets really interesting.
So why did this performance even begin? Well, to understand that, we've got to look at the upcoming, get this, semi-quincentennial. Yeah, that's a mouthful, I know. It's the official name for America's 250th birthday. And according to the theory we're exploring, this big party on the horizon created an absolute, full-blown political panic.
Okay, so what was the fear? The fear was that this anniversary would turn into a massive, years-long political rally just for one side of the aisle. So you have the progressive establishment, and they're really worried about losing their grip on the national story. They feel like they have to do something, and something drastic, to stop the American flag from basically becoming the exclusive property of just one group.
So, a plan was hatched. The source we're pulling from calls it the Great Patriotic Heist. It's this deliberate strategy to go out and reclaim the symbols of American patriotism. And this is key. It wasn't about some newfound genuine belief. No, this was pure brand management. Let's be super clear about what this heist actually is. The idea is that you can perform love of country. Wave the flags, say all the right words, but not because you actually feel it. You're doing it to take away its power as a political weapon for your opponents, to neutralize it.
And this is basically the playbook. First up, reclaim the whole look and feel of patriotism. Next, you reframe the very act of dissent as the highest form of patriotism. See what they did there? And then you take all these progressive ideas and you just wrap them up in red, white, and blue. And at the same time, you shift the focus away from 1776 and onto this idea of America as a project that's always unfinished.
But here's the twist, and it's a big one. The thing about any performance is that the actors can start to believe their own lines, and that's exactly what supposedly happens here. This strategic gesture, this thing that was only meant to be temporary, it starts to have this real, totally unintended effect on the people doing the performing.
The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre really put it best. You become what you pretend to be. The source we're looking at argues this is almost like a kind of American magic. You start by performing an ideal, right? Like patriotism. And just by going through the motions, you slowly, almost accidentally, start to make it real for yourself.
The theory uses this really powerful metaphor for this whole journey, a cultural Rumspringa. Now, if you know the term, it's from the Amish tradition. It's when young people leave their closed community to go experience the real world. And in this context, it's describing progressives stepping out of their own cultural bubble to actually engage with, mainstream America. So, the journey looks something like this. First, you leave that bubble of constant critique. You step outside. You're expecting to find, basically barbarism, right? A shallow, hostile culture. But instead, and this is the shock, you discover kindness. You find community, a real sense of belonging. And after that, there's just no way you can go back completely unchanged.
So what is it that's actually causing this big change? Well, this brings us to the secret main character of our whole story, this unseen, quiet force that actually holds all the power.
It's called the default republic. And the key thing to get here is that this is not a political party. It's a temperament. We're talking about the huge majority of people, maybe 80%, who aren't online arguing about culture all day. They're not writing manifestos. They're just living their lives. And by doing that, they act as the country's stabilizing force. They're the ballast in the ship.
And its secret power isn't aggression, it's absorption. The theory calls this cultural judo. Think about it. It doesn't fight its critics head-on. Instead, it uses their own energy, their own momentum, to just pull them into the mainstream. It basically metabolizes rebellion until it just becomes another part of the system.
And, this isn't some new thing. If you look back through American history, patriotism has gone through constant reboots. It started as an act of rebellion. Then it became about civic duty. Then you had this split between patriotism as branding versus patriotism as protest.
Then it became kitschy and about recovery, and more recently it's been framed through trauma and disillusionment. The point is, the definition is always changing, because the country is always absorbing new arguments and ideas and fitting them under that same flag.
So how does this all end? How does this story resolve? Well, it's not with a big, epic battle. It's with an invitation. The final act isn't one side crushing the other. It's one side simply, quietly welcoming the other one home.
And the source gives us this just fantastic metaphor to explain this. On one hand, you have the bonfire. This is the ideological approach. It's where everyone gathers to shout their theories and burn down old myths. It's all about control. But then, you have the barbecue, and that's the default republic. It's messy, it's loud, it's communal. You're not shouting theories, you're sharing plates. It's not about control at all. It's about belonging.
And here's the really crucial point. The greatest strength of this quiet majority is just hospitality. It doesn't punish the performers for their initial hypocrisy. It doesn't shout, "I told you so." It sees them coming back not as a surrender, but just as them growing up. It forgives them for coming home late and simply hands them a plate.
And this next quote, man, it just captures the entire theory in one perfect sentence. It says it all. The default republic doesn't argue with the revolution. It feeds it dinner. That's it. That's the whole game.
And so, all of this leaves us with one final big question to think about. Is the future of patriotism really an argument that has to be won? Or is it more like a barbecue that you can just join? Maybe it's not some fortress that has to be captured, but just an open invitation to a party that's been going on this whole time.